You look at the head coaching history and the regime there, someone that has won playoff games in many straight seasons. He's, the winningest coach in sports since 2020. The argument always is that's Josh Allen's stat. But then people like to say quarterback isn't a win, or wins aren't a quarterback stat. Yep. So it gets me confused. So if wins aren't a quarterback stat, then that's not a Josh Allen stat. But we like to use wins as a quarterback stat when we're arguing.
It's our narrative.
Correct. But we don't like to use it in the playoffs. We don't like to use it when he's 500 in the playoffs. We don't like to use it any other time. But when it comes to McDermott, we like to bring up, well, this is all Josh Allen stats. It's all his metrics. It's all Josh Allen. And it's interesting. I really do think that side of it's interesting. I do think that Sean McDermott goes to the Arizona Cardinals or he goes somewhere similar tomorrow. So I think the coaches, and from what I've been told from the players that I know and who I've built relationships with, and I don't mind going on air saying they were caught off guard. So that tells me that although there was some raw emotion after the game, I don't know that it was tied directly to the moves today. I do think that maybe Sean felt that he had some pressure. He threw Jacoby Myers' name multiple times last week and then shut down Jacoby Myers, which is interesting. And obviously we know the Ingram Slay story. We don't know who wanted Slay. Sean seemed more upset about Slay, in my opinion, in press conferences that he didn't show up. Brandon was like, I would have wanted to keep Ingram. We think that it was Brandon on the Ingram thing. We don't really know that one. That could have been Sean saying we need a veteran corner in this situation. We don't know that one just being going, we want to go with Slay. So those are some of the more immediate ones. And then the receiver discussion, the WGR receiver discussion is just one that's never going to end. But either way, we are now gloating on the fact of Brandon Beane needs to go. This is what I want. And we're forgetting the fact that since 13 seconds, we've been wanting Sean McDermott gone. That is what people and fans have wanted. People like myself, maybe like you, Dan, and others have brought up some points of why maybe the grass isn't always greener, especially this year. The candidate pool sucks. There's a lot of head coaching positions open. Obviously, the Bills will be at the front of the list of who you go and coach a divisional round team with Josh Allen. You can pretty much secure anybody you wanted. And in my opinion, I think Terry Pegula maybe and Brandon Beane have maybe had discussions on who this would be. I don't think this was done in a vacuum. It wasn't done where Brandon's like, I'm going to do a 50-person search. I think that they had some targeted names that they think can increase this roster. And I don't think that Brandon was feeling like the players he drafted and was requested to draft have been where they needed to be. And Brandon Beane ultimately won the argument, and Brandon Beane had the data to Terry Pegula to prove that this is my vision. Look at how well I did from 2018 to 2022 or 2021, whatever. Look at how well that we were able to draft. And Sean's requesting these players, Dan, and this is what we're getting out of it.
Yeah.
So here's where I'm at.
So I posed the question on Twitter, and you and I were kind of talking about this right before we went live. I said, I'm not sure if we'll ever truly know, but based off of the moves this morning, was Sean McDermott the puppet master of Brandon Beane, or was Brandon Beane the puppet master of Sean McDermott? I think based off of the decision that we saw this morning, it's more than likely it was the former, that Sean McDermott probably had a hell of a lot more say in particular players that he wanted to bringing back his guys that were familiar with his system. There was a clear disconnect between both of these guys all offseason, like Kevin just ended up pointing out, with like maybe staying put at the trade deadline for Jacoby Myers, or not going for a specific guy, wanting to bring on some old vets onto the organization. And remember, Sean McDermott was brought in before Brandon Beane, right? Like that was Sean McDermott's guy that was ultimately ended up brought into the conversation. So did Brandon Beane really have full control of this roster? I think that we need to ask ourselves that question. And so I really do. I think that this organization looked at Beane and they said, all right, dude, we're going to give you another shot. They promoted him though, Kev. So does that tell you that his leash may be longer than people are expecting?
I thought both of them had that leash, but for sure on Brandon Beane, here's what I got on. I thought Brandon Beane had that leash, and he did. So I was correct. I thought that Sean McDermott also had that leash. I was incorrect. So I think that when you kind of look at this holistically, there was clearly, for the first time this season, some distension. And I think it started maybe even with the draft, to where they went all defense. Why are we going to assume that Brandon Beane isn't? I think what part of the WGR discussion that we don't talk about was probably Brandon honestly covering up for or discussing the fact of like, this is who my head coach / coaching staff in general wanted. And I appeased them. And I also didn't think there was any value at receiver in the draft. he is correct. This receiving draft was not good. Burden turned out to be okay. That would have come at the cost of Maxwell Harrison. Obviously, Harrison was really good at times this year, wasn't able to play down the stretch. But other than that possible swap, there wasn't anything else there. You had Dante Thornton getting overdrafted. You had plenty of other players, in my opinion. Arian Smith, a guy that went to the Jets who was inactive, overdrafted. There was plenty of examples of receivers, especially after the top, whether you like Emeka Egbuka. I think he played really well. I think he's a talented player. I think Beane was going through all that in his head at the time. He was like, whoa, I'm coming on to talk about the defense. I'm coming on to talk about the players my coaching staff and I wanted. And you're sitting here still hammering about receiver. Which receiver did you want in this specific draft? If you want to talk about when we took Kincaid, fine. Kincaid produced in the NFL playoffs. He did have an injury-ridden season, but he's in the playoffs, and he's producing over 130-ish yards and multiple touchdowns over the 2 games. So, Dan, I guess the power struggle was real. And at some point, Beane was like, dude, we're both reporting to Terry Pagula, and neither of us have ultimate say. So I don't have the cards to trump you when you ask for TJ Sanders. I'm going to play nice and see the value in what, if you're saying we need TJ Sanders at the end of the game in pass rush to win a game, good for you. But here's the thing. He wanted Bosa. We have TJ Sanders, and they both came up a completely empty nothing burgers in the NFL playoffs. I think that Beane may have had enough evidence to show that having him hire another GM is going to go the same way possibly. But let me prove to you, I've drafted well at times. I have one of the best draft value scores in the league. And ultimately, I'm the one that got you Josh Allen. I think that's an ultimate trump card. As much as we can't live off of 2018 anymore, Dan, you can say the reason you're building a stadium is because you had Barstool. You had plenty of other people absolutely hate Josh Allen. It wasn't Joe Burrow. It wasn't the number 1 overall pick, and we just happened to lose out. We had the opportunity to scout multiple players, and in our opinion, we got the best player out of the draft after multiple quarterbacks were selected. And it was my job to be aggressive to get the guy. Brandon Beane's inherently aggressive. I think you see an aggressive Brandon Beane without a more conservative Sean McDermott at the helm.
Have you ever been more shocked and not shocked at the same time? This has been a very perplexing situation that has you trying to understand what the mindset of the organization is. You just come off yet another heartbreaking loss. What else is new? 3 consecutive exits in the postseason by 3 points. Funny enough, I found that this exit amongst maybe all of them was the least damning on Sean McDermott. I thought that this defense really stepped up in both games, including that Denver game. You only allow 1 true touchdown drive in the second half. The other 3 points gifted to the Broncos off of that early turnover by the Buffalo Bills offense to put the Denver Broncos in scoring position right off of the bat. Now, I had said after that game, after the loss, 6 straight years with a postseason victory, no Super Bowl appearance. I said, look, I understand the fatigue. If you want change, it's justifiable. I didn't think using the loss to the Broncos as the catalyst for the firing was fair, because I did not think that fell on the shoulders of McDermott the way people think that it did, or the way that it has in years past. But when you do look at the culmination of a 9-year career where the Bills have literally done everything under the sun that dynasties have done. The Bills have done quite literally everything that dynasties in this sport have done, besides make a Super Bowl, besides win a Super Bowl. I've talked about this before, but even what I just mentioned, 6 straight years with a playoff victory, only 3 other teams have done it. The Chiefs, the Cowboys, the Patriots, all 3 of them have won 3 titles in that span. The Bills, I quite literally yesterday saw a tweet that just had me sick, because I said the Bills are literally the best to never do it. That if there's going to be, if there's a movie title when it's all said and done, and the Josh Allen-led Buffalo Bills don't win one, the title of the movie will be the best to never do it. In the last 6 years, the Bills have scored the most points in the NFL, allowed the fewest points in the NFL, have the best record in the NFL, and have a point differential of 902. No other team over plus 600. That's over on Football Perspectives Twitter. He tweeted that out. And speaking of perspective, it really puts into perspective what these Buffalo Bills have done over the last 6 or so years, and how unbelievable it is that has not culminated in a championship. Where I'm stunned here is not necessarily the change, because once again, after all I just said, to not have won one, I understand wanting change. But for Sean McDermott to be pigeonholed here as what seems to be the scapegoat, while Brandon Beane is not only in the same boat, but promoted, I find to be incredibly head-scratching. After the year that Brandon Beane just put together, where his soundbite on GR was a running joke for months, this wide receiver core was deemed to be one of the worst in the NFL by anybody who watches the sport, justifiably so. It winds up being an issue all throughout the year. You get to the trade deadline, you don't make a move, and then you justify not making a move by saying that you almost made a move, but the Dolphins wanted a future first round instead of this year's first round, and I wasn't willing to do it. You look at the roster construction in itself, and it feels like Josh Allen has elevated what otherwise would be a roster that would be towards the middle of the pack. I like Brandon Beane. I think he's done a great job. I know that there's been pitfalls. The thing of it is, though, is McDermott, of course, had his pitfalls too. I look at these two guys, and I say that they've had some really great, they have some really great stuff on their resume. They have some big gaffes on their resume.
Yeah, so this is pretty loaded situation, right? I mean, Sean McDermott, he's been around for 9 years. He helped install that winning culture for the Buffalo Bills, turn things around, help end that drought. So that's something that Bills Mafia forever be thankful for with Sean McDermott. You know, the clapping hands on the sidelines, 98 wins in the regular season, second most by a Bills head coach. Really impressive resume. But the thing is, I personally feel as if with Josh Allen at the quarterback position, Sean McDermott plateaued. That's how I feel. I feel as if he plateaued. He was unable to get past that AFC Championship game. And at times, he made some decisions in those playoff games that contributed to those losses. So here we are now in 2026 after another divisional round loss to the Denver Broncos this time on the road. And it's confusing to me because Sean McDermott, I have also kind of been like, you know, I feel as if maybe his stay has been overdue. However, with that being said, I do find it confusing that on the same day, Brandon Beane gets a promotion because Sean McDermott, at the end of the day, is working with what is supplied to him by the general manager. The general manager's job on paper is to draft and construct the best possible roster. How much say did Sean McDermott have in that? We don't know. But at the end of the day, having your general manager who put out this roster in 2025 did not address needs at the trade deadline and went into the playoffs with Brandon Cooks, Keon Coleman, and Khalil Shakir at the wide receiver position in this game against the Denver Broncos, that's very questionable to me. And I think if you get rid of the one, you should be doing it to both, not promoting the other.